A few months ago, Sensei Hellfire taught you all about the ABCs of JRPGs, and I am confident that the knowledge that I instilled in you has made you not only a better gamer, but a better person. However, there is still much to learn about the world of JRPGs, and today we're looking into alternative titles for each letter. And today's your lucky day because we've got the great Erick Landon here to help teach you the XYZs of JRPGs. If you're a sub to me, I'm sure you'll all be sub to him already, but if not, you should go do that right now. Alright, here we go. A is for Atelier, an absolutely massive JRPG series developed by Gust. This series spans 22 mainline games, starting with Atelier Marie in 1997 up to Atelier Riser 2 released in late 2020. This series is all about crafting. Each title places a focus on gathering materials and strategically crafting them into new items required for quests or to help you in battle. Crafting is what Atelier is all about and where the real fun can be found. Unfortunately, the combat and the story are usually pretty simple, and most of the time they're just there to act as goals for the crafting system and to make the gathering of materials more interesting. The visual style of these games remain consistent with a cutesy anime art style, cheesy dialogue, and a serious emphasis on fan service, if that's what you're into. If you want a stress-free, relaxing JRPG series to get into, then Atelier may be your answer.
B is for Batten Kaitos, a duology of games that still remains an exclusive to the GameCube. They were developed by Monolith Soft and Tree Crescendo, and in fact, the first two games the latter ever created. In them you follow outstanding stories by masterminds Masato Kato for the first game and Ko Kojima for its prequel. Beautiful visuals and excellent battle mechanics, they combine the use of cards for everything. Weapons, armor, spells, skills, items, all used during battle. These are two excellent games that I hope will be remastered one day for modern systems.
C is for Code Vein, a Soulsy-style JRPG that you should definitely check out if you're into this genre. Released by Bandai Namco in 2019, Code Vein features a structure and difficulty you would expect from a Souls game with a beautiful anime art style and an added emphasis on storytelling and character development. One unique feature here is that you progress through dungeons and take on bosses with an AI party member. Unfortunately, this is something that I felt the game could have done without. Most of the other elements in Code Vein were great. The story and the characters are interesting, and the audio and visuals are outstanding, and there are some great maps for exploration. Just beware of the cathedral level. No one likes that bloody cathedral level.
D is for Devil Survivor, two Shin Megami Tensei spin-offs and the only strategy RPGs in the whole series. They were originally released on the Nintendo DS to mixed reviews thanks to their huge difficulty spikes. They were enhanced and rebalanced for the 3DS a few years later. These two are equally amazing games with great writing and excellent gameplay, developed by the creators of Langrisser and Growlancer, Career Soft. Masterpieces that I think both SMT and SRPG fans should definitely try.
E is for Eternal Sonata, a musically focused RPG developed by Tree Crescendo in 2007. As you would probably gather, this JRPG places a large focus on music in both its story and other elements in the game. Eternal Sonata revolves around the pianist and composer Frédéric Chopin, who died when he was 39. The story takes place in a fictional world dreamed up by Chopin in his final hours. Here, he travels around this dream world, involving himself in events related to his historical life, meeting many characters along the way. These characters are all named after musical terms such as polka, beat, and salsa. Eternal Sonata was praised for its beautiful visuals, outstanding musical score, innovative battle system, and great cast of characters, but was criticized for its linear storytelling that offers very little exploration.
F is for Fire Emblem, and it obviously needs no introduction. It's the most popular SRPG franchise of all time and also the one that popularized the genre in Japan. The first Fire Emblem is one of the most historically and influential JRPGs ever made, and I'm so happy to see the series still alive nowadays.
G is for Golden Sun, a series of JRPGs released on handheld systems in the 2000s. The first two titles, Golden Sun and Golden Sun The Lost Age, were released on the Game Boy Advance, selling over 1 million copies each. Golden Sun Dark Dawn was released 8 years later in 2010 on the Nintendo DS, but didn't sell even close to as many copies. While the narratives of each game revolves around alchemy, each is told from different points of view. In Golden Sun, Isaac and his companions set off to prevent another group from unleashing the power of alchemy to the world. The sequel, The Lost Age, follows the story of the first game's surviving antagonists, and the final game, Dark Dawn, takes place 30 years later, following the paths of the descendants of the previous game's characters. Now, this series was highly acclaimed, featured in loads of top game lists, and continues to have a strong cult following today. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like this series is going to make a return anytime soon, probably due to the poor sales of Dark Dawn.
H is for HalfMinute Hero, a criminally underrated game on the PSP. It was later released for PC and remade for the Xbox Live service. A sequel was also made, but only for Steam. It's a silly game but very addictive to play, where you control a hero whose job is to kill the Dark Lord of each land he visits. With the help of a charming but conniving goddess, he'll need to do it all in less than 30 seconds. It's such an extremely creative, retro-looking RPG.
I is for Ayam Setsuna, the first title developed by Tokyo RPG Factory, a company founded by Square Enix to create modern interpretations of those Golden Age RPGs. Director Hashimoto stated that Chrono Trigger was the game's main inspiration, but its development was also influenced by Dragon Quest, Zelda, the Saga series, Mother, and Xenogears. There are some pretty big names there. Ayam Setsuna is set in a snowy, monster-ridden world and follows Andir, the guardian of Setsuna, who is on a journey to the Last Lands to sacrifice herself in order to appease the demons of the land. If you're a fan of 90s JRPGs, there is a lot to love here, such as a modern take on old-school visuals as well as a classic ATB system. Since the release of Ayam Setsuna, Tokyo RPG Factory developed Lost Sphere and Oninaki and are currently working on an untitled fourth game.
J is for Jeanne d'Arc, an exclusive strategy RPG on the PSP based on the old story of Joan of Arc. They included magic elements and monsters, so you'd think it was a silly adaptation, but far from that. It's very serious, tragic, and dramatic, with a masterfully written story. It was developed by Level 5 with barely any knowledge in tactical RPGs, so I'm glad to see how amazingly they pulled it off. This is a must-play.
K is for Kudelka, one of the scariest JRPGs out there. Released in 1999 for the PS1, this was the second title developed by Saknoth, who also created the highly acclaimed Shadow Heart series. In fact, Kudelka acts as a prequel to this series, introducing many of the characters and story elements seen in future titles. Kudelka is set in the Nemeton Monastery and plays very similar to a classic Resident Evil game in its survival horror exploration through creepy pre-rendered backgrounds. The biggest issue with Kudelka is the turn-based gameplay, which moves way too slow. Entering in and out of battle plus the lengthy spell animations take a lot of fun out of the overall experience. That aside, there is still a lot to like about this game, and fans of the Shadow Heart series should definitely check this one out.
L is for Langrisser, yet another pioneer in the strategy RPG genre. During the very early 90s, it was released to compete against Fire Emblem in Japan. Overseas, we only got the first game retitled as Warsong on the Sega Genesis. After several games, developers Careersoft quit Masaya Games and were hired by Atlus to develop a spiritual successor, Grow Lancer. Both series were successful over there, but in the West, most of them remain as pretty much hidden gems. Langrisser was revived though, with a remake of the first two games, including Warsong, for modern systems, and I hope the same can happen one day with Grow Lancer.
M is for the Mana series, a long-running JRPG series starting with Final Fantasy Adventure released in 1991 all the way to Trials of Mana Remake and The Legend of Mana Remaster released over the past couple of years. This series started as a handheld side story to the Final Fantasy series, but started to introduce its own unique style and elements with the release of Secret of Mana. It has now grown into its own, being set in the world of Mana with reoccurring stories involving the world tree and consistent monster designs and musical themes used throughout. Perhaps my favourite thing about this series is the couch co-op. Many of these titles allow you and a buddy to select a character and work through the entire narrative together, which is something that I wish more RPGs would do.
N is for Knights of Azure, 2 games so far developed by Ghost, the creators of the Atelier series. These 2 are dark and gritty action RPGs with some gothic influence and beautiful design. They're Ghost games, however, so that means they're also boosted with crazy fan service. But the combat is so good here, I felt they deserve more recognition over gameplay than anything else. The first game centers around Arnis, in a quest to defeat the Night Lord and the fiends that steal nighttime from people. The sequel follows Arush, who becomes a full-fledged vampire after being killed by the Moon Queen, so her purpose is to stop her from achieving her sinister plans. The games are connected, but it's not indispensable to play one to understand the other. Great hidden gems here.
O is for Ogre Battle, a series of tactical and RTS style RPGs released in the 90s and early 2000s. This series was created by Yasumi Matsuno, the genius behind FF Tactics, Vagrant Story and FF12. The first title, March of the Black Queen, was released in 1993 for the Super Nintendo. This game begins on the outskirts of the Empire with the main character leading a revolution against the Empire who has turned evil through the use of black magic. Here, there is a large emphasis on unit management, strategic movement around the world map, classes, and alignment. These real-time gameplay elements are also seen in Ogre Battle 64 and Ogre Battle Gaiden. However, the gameplay in the 2 Tactics Ogre installments feature a grid-based tactical RPG system, similar to what you would see in Final Fantasy Tactics. This series has been acclaimed by critics and has sold over 2 million copies worldwide. Unfortunately, since 2010, this series has been laying dormant in the basement of Square Enix HQ, and it's unlikely that we'll be seeing it again anytime soon.
P is for Phantasy Star, even though it's pronounced as an F. It needs no introduction either, since its all-time classic on the Master System is one of the most influential JRPGs ever. It spawned 3 sequels on the Sega Genesis, the 4th one being a masterpiece and a commercial success. All of them were turn-based RPGs. But then it became 100% action with the success of Phantasy Star Online and has remained that way ever since. Are any of the action RPGs any good? Well, actually, most of them, thankfully.
Q is for... After the monstrosity that was Quest 64 from my previous video, I bet you didn't think I could find another Q game. You would be wrong. Q is for Quest, Brian's Journey, a remake of Quest 64 released for the Game Boy Color. It contains everything we know and hate about Quest 64 and makes it look even shittier. Well, actually, there are some expansions to the story and gameplay. Just like the original, Brian's Journey was criticized for a bland story and overly simplified RPG elements. Guys, I really don't want to talk about this anymore. Over to you, Erick.
R is for Radiant Historia, a turn-based RPG released first on the Nintendo DS, 8 years later with an enhanced port on the 3DS. Major differences are there mostly on the art style, but both versions play equally amazing. I'm a huge fan of this game, a tale of a mercenary with the power to go back in time and alter the events to prevent tragedy. Also with an innovative battle system with strategic combat that relies on enemy position and combos, this is another masterpiece that I strongly recommend.
S is for Star Ocean, a highly acclaimed action RPG series developed by Tri-Ace. This is one of the earliest RPGs that allowed players to alter the storyline through the player's actions and relationships in the game. I mean, Star Ocean, the second story, has over 80 possible endings. Wowee! A key element to this series is its sci-fi themes and focus on space travel. In fact, the visuals were actually inspired by Star Trek. Now, this series has been very well received, all up into the 5th installment, Integrity and Faithlessness, released in 2016. Many fans thought this would be the end of the series, which is why the recent announcement of the 6th title surprised so many. Star Ocean: The Divine Force looks incredible and definitely has some major Xenoblade Chronicle vibes. I can't wait to see how this game shapes up next year.
T is for the Tale series, legendary action RPG franchise that started all the way back in 1995 with Tales of Fantasia. Almost every title has been critically acclaimed in Japan, with the majority of the games being released overseas, most of them to a commercial success. With the latest release of Tales of Arise on modern consoles, I hope this series continues being as successful as ever.
U is for Unchained Blades, a dungeon-crawling RPG released for the 3DS and PSP. Yeah, there aren't too many U JRPGs out there, so this one will have to do. Unchained Blades plays similar to the Wizardry series, but has a greater emphasis on story. Your main goal is to work your way through mazes and labyrinths in a party of 4, defeating the monsters that cross your path. There is a focus on recruiting enemy monsters into your party, as each of the 4 party members can fight with 4 monsters each. There was also a sequel to this game titled Unchained Blades XYZ, but this was never released outside of Japan, but it has been translated by fans.
V is for Valkyrie Profile, not to be confused with Valkyrie Chronicles, which is also an awesome series. Valkyrie made a name for itself with a legendary PS1 release at the end of December of 1999. A masterpiece of a sequel came out for the PS2 almost 7 years later, a spin-off on the Nintendo DS 2 years later with mixed reviews, and finally a mobile spin-off in 2016 most people didn't care about. The current state of this series is a crime I can't condone as a huge fan. Tri-Ace and Square Enix hopefully will work together again one day for a new proper console revival.
W is for White Knight Chronicles, the PS3 JRPG that was hyped to be the next big thing, that was never even close to being the next big thing. From the outside, it looks kinda great, travelling through huge detailed environments and transforming into giant knights to destroy oversized monsters. Who wouldn't want that? Unfortunately, the average story and poor combat system is where the game fell short. Also worth noting was the multiplayer integration, which was one of the game's biggest selling points, but its servers were shut down years ago, so experiencing that is no longer an option.
X is for Sino Saga, the continuation of what could have been a Xenogears series. This is a trilogy with a tragic demise, as only the first game was successful worldwide. The second one got very mixed reviews because of its change in art style, its convoluted battle system, and its difficulty learning curve. It all worked out perfectly for the third game, but even by then, fans had given up. Big mistake, as the third and final entry is by far the best of them all in my opinion. Sino Saga is one of the best science fiction RPG series of all time.
Y is for Yakuza Like a Dragon, the critically acclaimed JRPG spin-off to the massively popular Yakuza series. This game is set in 2019, 3 years after Yakuza 6. Here, you play the role of an entirely new character, Ishiban, a low-ranking member of the Arakawa family. This lack of requirement to play the previous titles makes it perfect if you want to jump into the series for the first time. Although Like a Dragon takes a bit of a new direction, mainly with its turn-based combat, it still holds on to many of the staples that made the series so popular, such as its quirky humour and loads of side activities to experience, like karaoke. Sega has revealed that Yakuza Like a Dragon 2 is in development, but not much else is known at this point. Alright Eric, finish it off.
Z is for Zangie Zero, a very obscure game released on PS4, Windows and PS Vita, but the latter version remained only in Japan! It plays like a roguelike RPG in first person where if you move, the enemy moves, but combat is real time instead of turn-based. You play as a group of random characters that have no idea how they got to a completely abandoned city. They will need to find a way out while actually having to survive, and it takes its survival features to the extreme of characters having to go pee or dealing with stress. Also, they seem to be growing old and dying quickly, so they need to be reborn through an arcade machine. Yeah, it's one of the most bizarre JRPGs ever created, but that's also why I wanted to include this game on the list.
Now you know your XYZs, it is time to RPG. If you got something out of this video, throw me a like and also sub to myself and Erick if you haven't already. See you next time.